This week on the Converge Pod, I'm chatting with konverjdans collaborator Antuan Byers.
You're so cool. Stay right there. I got something to prove.
How was the rest of rehearsal last night?
It was good. We got a lot done. We
Nice.
worked on the duet with Wukaj and I, which is
Hmm.
cool. And then we revisited Tiffany and I's duet,
Oh,
which was also nice.
fun.
Let that come back naturally. Like, it's in our, I think, maybe physical memory. So it was nice to, like,
Bring it back to the top of the brain.
yeah. And I feel like with Converge, we often do, and I don't know if this is in there or not, whatever, but we often do like new works. And these are new works, right? They're still like continuations and stuff. But it was
Yeah.
like usually like when the show ends, we would be on to a new thing. So it's
Yeah.
nice, at least, in my history in the company. So it's nice to like continue something and it also feels new. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a first for us too to actually like revisit things that we already started,
Mhm.
especially for the one I'm doing. It was like a solo for Amy back in 2021, and now it's coming back for like 3.0, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "This is interesting. Who knows if I'll do a 3.0 again?" It's a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, thanks for sitting down with me, Antoine. I'm so happy to have you, and just, like, when I say that the dance community is happy to have you, like, at large, it feels like the biggest understatement ever. Like, I'm just so proud and honored to have you as an advocate and champion for dance artists, and to have you as part of the Converge fam. Like, it just fits, and we love you and love everything that you do. So
Yeah. I
thanks for
appreciate
being
that.
you.
Thank you. And, I appreciate my community as well. And, I'm feeling the gratitude and appreciation, but also like that's, at the center of my work and who informs my work. I'm also grateful for you, and Amy and Tiff and Converge and all the dancers in the company. Because that's also a huge part of the inspiration and why I keep coming back is because I love what you all are creating, how you're creating it, and also to support, three women who are really pushing forward in a lot of ways in the field, choreographically and artistically, but also in your leadership style. Yeah, I mean, I can talk more about that later, but like, you started with this kind of collaborative or horizontal leadership structure that a lot of organizations with a lot more history and time in the field are now shifting into. So I think that you were definitely forward thinking in that way. So yeah, really inspired to be a part of the Converge community and family as well.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Antoine. I guess to steal from your bio, you write that you share your time building communities, creating resources, and finding innovative avenues to support your community, which we feel every day in working with you. But where did the value or importance of community begin for you? Like, where did that start?
Yeah, I love that question. I don't, let me see. I don't know. Maybe it's like, where did it start? I think at the beginning, I guess. I don't know.
Mhm.
I'd say for now, let's say in the beginning.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, just thinking about, growing up in Dallas, I think community first started off looking like family. And then I also think about community. You have like your school folks, your school friends, that's a part of your community. You have like your neighborhood, literally, that's part of your community. I was a big church kid, so that was a big part of my community. So I really think it started as far back as I can remember, and it definitely shifted over time, right? So, like, those were like my childhood communities, but that might look very different than what I consider community today. But yeah, I think it really started then, and just really understanding how we keep us safe, how
Mhm.
we support each other, and we being the community, and how important that is, and how that's a big part of culture, in a lot of our lives, right?
Yeah.
I think that we depend on sometimes a lot of outside sources to quote unquote keep us safe. But I think that's what really community felt like. It's that person you can go to next door and get some sugar if you need it, right? Or it's knowing that, if something happens to your kid in the neighborhood, that there's like people watching who are there to support and make sure they get home safely at night. So those are kind of my early memories of community. And I think that a lot of the values are still, consistent to what I consider community today, even if the people or the places look or feel different.
Yeah, and have shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess where did dance or the arts enter that kind of sphere? Or like where did it enter little Antoine's world?
It was like medium-sized Antoine because I started dance late. I think a lot of
An air
people
quotes late.
there was air
Yes.
quote late, yes. I think a lot of my, colleagues might have started at 2 or 3. I started dancing when I was 12. I also have friends that started when they were 17. So I know I'm not the latest to the game, but I think dance in this kind of formal context or this codified context definitely entered in, yeah, around 12. But I
Mhm.
had been dancing in church. I had done like, we had a mime ministry. Um, if you know, you know. A drill team or a step team, which I think is like dance for sure.
Yeah.
We also had praise dance, which I didn't participate as much in. But yeah, so I think that's where it like really started. But then like at age 12 is where I went to my first musical theater camp.
Mhm.
And that's where I was introduced to like a ballet class, a modern class,
Mhm.
tap, but I was also taking acting courses and singing lessons. And, I'd done that for a couple of summers and had been asked to kind of join their smaller group of like young professionals.
Mhm.
And then after that, I kind of dropped everything else and focused on dance.
Mhm.
So that's when dance became my, full time thing. But I've been a musician for a while. Like I've been in school choir. I've done the whole all state, all region, you know,
Yeah.
circuit. I also was in band, so I was a percussionist. So like, music has always been a really big part of it too. So I can't think about the dance without the music.
Mhm.
So even though like I might have not have been experiencing quote unquote dance
Mhm.
physically before that time, I definitely always had music in my life. And maybe there was this like less formal version of dance that I was experiencing that existed outside of like a ballet studio.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little also a more full answer, but kind of observing the formal introduction of dance in my life, but also that I've always been dancing and that we've all always been dancing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And how did I guess your dance community like I don't know, get you to New York or how did it step you into the new phase of your life? Cuz coming into it at age 12 or at least we'll say codifying it at age 12 is like a pretty big shift, you have to like things happen so quickly and so young when you enter dance as a career. So how quick was that shift for you of like I'm not just dancing but I'm going to take this uh, you know into my career or
I love that question. I think once I was introduced to we're doing air quotes dance for today, right? Because we're talking
yeah.
about within the institution and all of that, right? But once I was introduced to dance in that way, I kind of knew, maybe I didn't know I knew,
Mhm.
but I was definitely had laser clear focus on performing and dancing in that moment. And I
Mhm.
might have known that that would be something that would I'd be, fortunate enough to carry through the rest of my life thus far and hopefully for the rest of my life, right? But I was so clearly focused on it. It's all I thought about, it's all I did at home. So I think thinking about community, my parents were so selfless with that. I
Mhm.
think, I didn't grow up with any professional dancers in my family, my immediate family, my community until I had that community, right? Like that's not something I grew up with. So this was not something that my parents understood necessarily. But
Yeah.
they didn't like overly question it. They were super supportive. They would sit outside of the dance classes and the rehearsals and wait for me. Which a lot of us might share that with our parents, but my parents didn't know what this was.
Yeah.
That's I also was like, when it was time to decide on like what I wanted to do for school, I knew I wanted to be in New York. We have a lot of my cousins and stuff like that who have been to college, but it's mostly I'm from Texas. It's mostly been
Mhm,
Texas schools. A few
mhm.
of us have left, but going to New York was asking for a lot.
Yeah.
There were no questions asked.
That's good.
Um, and to me, that really is a significant thing about it because like I'm like, maybe there should have been more pushback. I don't know. Like they were it was like I hear stories from my friends and like that's not to say that like my parents were these like perfect parents that were supportive of everything, but like with the dance, I think they really just saw the thing that, brought me joy, that put a light in my eyes and
Mhm,
never questioned it.
mhm,
Only did what they could within their capacity to support me and push me towards that. So thinking about community, it always starts there.
mhm,
But then I think about like my dance friends who, would give me the tips on how to stretch my feet and stretch and all of that growing up. And then definitely thinking about mentors because that's what definitely also guided me in my decision to come to New York, to get my BFA in dance performance.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of what community did to support me. But it definitely took a village because I was, coming from a family, like I said, that didn't know as much about it and had to really trust in the community outside of that.
Mhm.
And then I really had to trust within everyone to hope that I was making the right decision. So, there was a lot of faith involved too. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess growing up in Dallas, was New York always this, like, I don't know, silver city on the horizon, or was that a dream you grew into, or did you know you wanted to leave?
I I wouldn't say always. It's
Yeah,
like I'll say this, whenever it came into my consciousness, and I'm saying it as in New York, but also dance, because like New York is the quote unquote dancing city. So like I
yeah,
think a lot of dancers have their eyes set on that at least at one point of their journey.
yeah,
Um, Once it came into my consciousness,
mhm,
it was where
yeah,
I was looking at. I didn't even apply for so I knew I wanted to go to college, right? As
mhm,
dancers, especially, you and I trained a little bit in the
yeah,
ballet kind of conservatory world where
yes,
you not always go to college right outside of it. So like I'd already made the decision that instead of going pro right away, I wanted to go to college. But
mm,
then from there, I pretty much every school I applied to was in New York. Like
yeah,
that was like non-negotiable for me.
yeah,
So I was pretty clear on it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and you ended up at the Ailey BFA program where
Mhm.
Giovanna also went, but you and
Yeah.
Łukasz also went, but you
Mhm.
never overlapped with either of them, right? You were all in your
Well,
separate,
yeah,
years.
Giovanna
Yeah.
was definitely someone I looked up to and knew in the field, but we didn't overlap in high
Mm,
school.
okay,
Wukash and I, though, Wukash was actually, I believe, in the scholarship program,
okay.
uh, and I was in the BFA program, but we would have classes together, which is what I loved about the Ailey program.
Mhm.
So I can't remember all the classes we had together, but I vividly remember men's ballet at I think 10 a.m. with Atwood. What was
Mhm.
his first name? We're gonna say Mr. Atwood for I think it was Robert Atwood?
That rings a bell for me, but
Yeah,
I
and
don't know.
I wanna lift him up because he was, like, legendary and excellent teacher, like, definitely.
Yeah.
I vividly remember that class with Wukash.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I guess a little bit talk about, like, your background in ballet and modern dance and, like, why we're talking about that as, like, air quotes dance versus just dance. That's a pretty thick question, but
It is, but I
have
love
fun.
it. Yeah. I'm gonna start with the first part, and then we're gonna get to the thicker part.
Yeah.
But my connection to like Ailey, I didn't see Alien for the first time live until my senior year in high school.
Mhm.
But within like kind of this Ailey lineage, we have like the Lester Hortons, the Martha Grahams, like
Yeah.
as these kind of styles and techniques that a lot of dancers in that lineage and Dunham technique
Mm.
experience. So growing up at Dallas Black Dance Theater, I also that was in that lineage. We also took Horton, Graham, Dunham, ballet, etc.
Mhm.
So even though I may have not had the Ailey company always in my view, there was this like lineage that immediately when I saw the company for the first time, I
Mm.
connected to it. Uh,
Mhm.
and that's what made the decision, right? I was looking
Yeah.
at a lot of different schools
Yeah.
at that time, but seeing the company live, that's when I was sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where like my formal training started was actually a Horton class. My first dance class was a Horton class. It wasn't a ballet class. It wasn't ballet tap combo. It was
Yep.
a roll
Or
down parallel
that is
second.
a hardcore first class.
Hey, you'll know on day one whether you want to do it or not.
Yes,
There's
it's
no
true, it's
question
true.
about it. Um, but yeah, I'm really grateful for that beginning and just to build off of that, I started at Happy Nia Dance Theater with Derek Whiters, who was a former Ailey dancer and deeply rooted Dance Chicago dancer. So I started there and then I went to Dallas Black Dance Theater, Dallas Ballet Center, which was a ballet school, and then Booker T. Washington High School for the Performing and Visual Arts, which was a performing arts high school. I say that to say I had training in a ballet conservatory, like, ballet is life kind of school, right?
Yes. Yes.
A really strong kind of modern dance school with like black dance lineage in there.
Yeah.
So we were taking the West African, the Dunham, different modern techniques. And I was at Booker T where I felt like I was being exposed to so much contemporary dance at that time.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm also just to comment on the point before about like these communities connecting and everything. I met you at a ballet summer intensive.
Yeah.
I met Amy at I think it was Northwest Dance Project, which was a more
Yeah.
contemporary dance program. Where did I meet Tiffany? Was it
It might
Con-
have been in Converge
yeah,
for the
yeah.
first time, but
Yeah.
now your
Now we
colleagues
work
have
together.
met, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm also just really grateful that I had that beginning that kind of set me up to really have these connections like with people in the field, but also like such a rich kind of lineage of dance ancestors, LOL,
Yeah.
running through my
Yeah.
my body. And then what was the thick part of the question again? Because I
Is
want to
why
make
we're using air quotes to describe
yeah.
institutional dance.
Yeah, so we can stick with Ailey for a little bit, right? So he has a
Mhm.
really famous quote where he says, "Dance came from the people and should be delivered back to the people."
Mm.
So I think the reason I'm using air quotes, or if I was writing, I would use like maybe a capital D dance to think about dance as like the institution rather than like the actual physical act of dancing, is
Mhm.
because dance has become this thing where not everybody gets to participate, right? Now, if you want to dance, you got to like pay $25 at Steps or at, Gibney or at insert any dance school,
Yep.
at least in New York here.
Yep.
Um, or, to experience a dance performance, tickets
Mhm.
are 100, $200. I dance at the Met where it's an opera house, but, if you want to see one of our shows, tickets go for $400 sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm using the air quotes for dance to just kind of remind us, right?
Mhm.
Us, but also the listeners, that we've created this institution around dance that keeps people out. The people I'm talking about are poor people, fat people, disabled people, people of color, women, non binary people, trans people. I
Mhm.
use the air quotes to remind us that really dance is for everybody. Um, but the institution of dance doesn't really make space for everybody in this moment, right?
Mhm.
Like dance is inherently ableist, straight up. Do you know
Yep.
what I mean? Like literally. Like we're not getting things maybe in an audition because our arabesque isn't high enough or our foot won't point, enough. But then, how then as a person who, might be living with a disability, or
Mhm.
who may not have all of their limbs, for an example, right? Like, where does that even make space for someone like that,
Right.
Or some of us who are straight bodied are dealing with like the body politics of the dance industry. Um, we're too big and we're straight bodied people. Like,
Mhm.
where in the world do the fat dancers or, larger body people fit into this conversation?
Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of why I use the air quotes. Yeah, just to remind us of that. And it's like, how do we bring dance back to the people in my organization, Black Dance Changemakers, which maybe we were talking about, maybe we wouldn't.
We
I don't
100% are gonna get
Okay.
there.
That's what we're exploring. It's like,
Yeah,
what are the systems? What are the walls that need to be torn down so that dance can really be delivered back to the people or given back to the people where it came from?
totally.
Um, and that's not to take it out of this professional sense, and what I mean by that is, like, that people are being paid for it, or right? Like, it's not to return it to this, like, only community or hobby based thing.
Mhm.
But I think restoring it to a place where any and everybody can dance. And what does that mean? And really digging our teeth into like what that actually looks like. Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and thanks for that answer. I guess diving into that feels so important because I feel a lot of well, Amy, Tiff, and I were all backgrounds in like classical ballet, and that I'll speak on my experience comes with like such a singular focus on yourself and your career, your body. Like there's such this really zoomed in focus that that environment gives you, and, like, founding Converge Dance has blown all of that wide open for me in my, like, dance journey, if I'll take this interview for myself for a second,
Yeah,
I don't know.
please.
But it's, like, just this expansion, that's happened, for me in my dance experience in working with Converge Dance, working with all of you, um, it just kind of blows all of these like really rigid walls wide open and makes us question why we have them in the first place. And I guess
Mhm.
we'll just jump ahead to 2020 here.
Yeah.
And in 2020 is when you founded Black Dance Changemakers, which, if I'm not mistaken, began as a weekly Zoom call, a moment of connection for the Black community during the peak of the pandemic, peak of Black Lives Matter. How did that space I don't know. What did that space do for you in that moment, and why did you need it? Even though it's a basic question, but
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I think that, we were all experiencing in that moment isolation. It was at the
Yeah.
start of COVID and our experience with that and navigating that. There was also racial uprisings, like you said, happening in the country and around the world. So
Mhm.
those two things together were really hard to deal with, right? Like, not only are we experiencing, some of the harshest police brutality of our time, like the harshest, like killings of black bodies and black lives, but we also like don't have community either, like these two
Right,
things.
everyone's dealing with it in their bubble,
Yeah,
which is
right.
yeah.
Um, so it really did start as, I mean, it first started off as an iMessage group. And
Mm.
that's when I first found out I think you can only have like 20 people in a group chat on iMessage. FYI, if you didn't know, you know. It might have expanded since then. This was also 2020. We've had a few updates since then. But it started with that iMessage group. And then we had a Zoom meeting and we would have that every week. Then we moved to like WhatsApp,
Mhm.
just so I could get more people in it. We did that for like several weeks and we had several different wow, I'm like thinking back to that time, several different conversations,
Yeah.
general open conversations, but also like what's it been like in the dance like academy, right? Thinking about the pre-professional, but also the BFA programs or the conservatory programs, like how to navigate
Mhm.
that. We talked about how to navigate like professional life as a dancer, as concert dancers, but also commercial dancers.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, we did a lot of different things within that time. And in October, I think of that year, that's when it was important to me to get it out of the contact list on my phone. Right?
Mhm.
It shouldn't only exist with people that I am directly connected with. There's many dancers who might need, this type of community. And
Mhm.
then two, like challenge myself and my community to also create something a little bit more formal that has like staying power within our industry.
Mhm.
So that's when we created Black Dance Changemakers. And yeah, now it's a little bit more than a weekly Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Members, all over the world, mostly based in the US, but we do have a few folks in Europe. And yeah, right now, just back to the kind of previous conversation, we're exploring what it means to give dance back to the people, specifically Black people. Uh,
Mhm.
and what that looks like for us right now is we're currently in the middle of our shrinkage study,
Mm.
which talks about hair discrimination in dance.
Mhm.
And it's starting out with a survey which you can take online at
We'll
blackdancechangemakers.com
link it somewhere here.
page. Yeah. um, we have one part which is like just a study to collect data from folks in the field about their experiences as a professional dancer, as a student, around their black hair. And then we're going into we've already started but continuing with some small group interviews and one-on-ones to talk to people and get a little bit more qualitative data.
Mhm.
We're also doing some like on the ground small group meetups and stuff. We have one coming up in Chicago, and some, of course, stuff in New York. And then we're going to produce a report that includes some resources for Black dancers on how to style their hair. You know, although we can't completely eliminate the hair discrimination in this field right now, we do have a lot of dancers who've been navigating it in different ways and might know, protective hairstyles for tour, for example, or how to do a French twist with 4C hair, for
Mhm.
example, right? How do we
Mhm.
share these resources to, still allow space for people to navigate the sometimes, rigid or Eurocentric kind of hair politics that exist in the world of dance. But then we're also going to produce some recommendations to these dance institutions, to these dance schools on how they can better navigate Black people and their hair. So, like using shrinkage as an example of like, how are we returning dance back to the people?
Mhm.
Hair has been a huge barrier for people in general, right? So when we benefit Black folks, we benefit everybody. You know what I'm saying? So I know that like Black people aren't the only people that have experienced maybe discrimination around their hair. There's some people who might want to have how to dye their hair a certain color who might not be able to because of like rigid things, or who
Mhm.
may have curly hair,
Mhm.
who also struggle with having to do three different hairstyles in one night because you're on a three bill
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
right? Like for example. So we're exploring that, trying to offer some resources to our community, and also some recommendations to kind of like help people better navigate and um, yeah, so that's like shrinkage as an example. I could give a few more, but I'll save us some time there. But it started off as just really this need for community, need for connection. And then today it's the same thing, but just on a little bit of a larger scale. And we're
Mhm.
growing slowly but surely. We're learning a lot. Um,
Yeah.
we just went through an intense phase of transformation in the past like year or two.
Mhm.
Started a whole new membership program
Mhm.
with kind of a freedom school training series, so it's been a lot of work, and we're still learning and still figuring a lot of stuff out as we always will within this journey.
Yeah.
But it's been really exciting to kind of see our community come together and transform this organization into what it is today.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah,
Where do you
that's
want it
quick.
where do you want it to go? How do you want it to continue growing?
I love that question. I think what I'll say is that it's a membership-led organization, so I
Mhm.
want to, as a leader, honor that as much as I can, and
Mhm.
continue to push the members' ideas, desires, and needs and wants to the center. And then, this is not the Antuan Byers project. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So Antoine Byers does not have to be a part of Black Dance Changemakers forever. So where do
Mhm.
I want it to go? I don't have a specific destination, but I do want it to get to a place to where it can be passed on to the next person who might be better fit to lead this organization at that time, right? Someone who might be younger, have some fresher ideas, or who might be connected to the community in a better way, right? Like right now, I'm a professional, I'm performing, but one day I might not be, and I might be in some different leadership positions, and it might be someone who's in the field on the ground who might be a better fit. So I'm trying to build an organization that can live on past Antoine, so that's where I want it to go.
Yeah, above and beyond the one who made it. In addition to your work with Black Dance Changemakers and Converge Dance, you're also a member of the Metropolitan Opera Ballet, and you're the VP of AGMA,
Yes.
which that's relatively recent, right? And has it been a full year?
It's
More than that?
almost been a year.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
almost
that's
a year.
incredible. That's
Mhm.
incredible. So I guess, um, I guess you can dive into your work with AGMA if you'd like, but I also want to look at just how your creative practice is informed by your advocacy work and the inverse of that. It might
Yeah.
be a natural synthesis for you, but how do you feel it kind of manifesting in the work you do today?
Yeah, I think the artistic practices definitely influence the like any advocacy or admin that I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Well, actually, as I think more, I think they're a little interconnected. So they all kind of, influence all of them. But I'll say that like with that, there's so much that we just get as dancers,
Yeah.
that so much that we understand kind of in this physical or even metaphysical sometimes space that we don't even have to add words to.
Mhm.
And not to say that that gets replicated in either administrative or advocacy spaces, but there's just we understand community in a very specific way that I, try to introduce into my other work.
Mhm.
Um, but then also in some of my organizing spaces, this is also what started Black Dance Changemakers, is I didn't really see much organizing happening in dance. And that's not to say it wasn't happening, but not happening in the way that I think me and my community needed it the most. So
Mhm.
I also am trying to bring in a lot of our advocacy, or even, you know, just understanding what organizing is, understanding maybe what an abolitionist politic is for dancers and Black dancers, and why we should be, maybe passionate about that. Understand what's happening in the world around us, and how that is also a part of our art, how that is also a part of our work, how that informs our creative practices.
Mhm.
So, and then bringing in kind of this administrative side too. How does I mean, and this is really connected with like, how does all this stuff work together? So thinking about artistically, like, what is the dancer's administrative practice? And that's not just for maybe founders, right? Us on the
Mhm.
call.
Mhm.
But thinking about just like, what are the demands of a freelance dancer in general, right?
Mhm.
And what are like good professional administrative practices when reading a contract,
Mhm.
when communicating with the director. These are all things that have informed each other and we can benefit from. And then just to talk a little bit about like maybe the AGMA part,
Mhm.
that so yes, I do serve as the vice president of dancers at AGMA, which is the American Guild of Musical Artists, and that is a labor union that represents a lot of dance companies and opera singers, actors, and stage managers, and now faculty members at the School of American Ballet.
Incredible.
Right, yeah, within the United States. So, I mean, that includes many of maybe your favorite ballet companies, some of your favorite modern companies, a lot of the opera houses that people are seeing opera at within the United States. So, um, I'm learning also a lot from other people within the union, because I think there's a certain like infantilization that dancers experience. And, I always explain what I mean by that is that like our kind of day-to-day lives in the dance studio sometimes have the same amount of control as like our 2 to 4 ballet tap combo,
Mhm.
is the same as a professional dance room space. And what do I mean by that? What you wear is
Mhm.
policed and controlled the same way. Your hair, we talked about shrinkage, your body,
Mhm.
know, your schedule in your life,
Mhm.
right? Obviously, there's going to be structure within it, but like there's also not usually time and place to have a life outside of dance and outside of the dance company you're working in. So that's what I mean by like the infantilization that we experience. So I'm also learning from the singers in my union who, not to say that they don't experience some of these, body politics and stuff like that, but I don't know. Those are adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't, my colleagues, they don't let people talk to them any kind of way. If it's time to take
Mhm.
a break, it's time to take a break. Some things that we're just really sensitive around as dancers because of how our
Yeah.
field is structured and how the hierarchies that exist,
And the
either are
education
unsaid,
behind
right?
it. Yeah.
Exactly, and how we're, like, conditioned into that, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm also, all that to say, like, the artistic admin and I guess advocacy are influencing each other, but even within those, there's little pockets of, like, inspiration that I'm learning from the singers, the stage managers, the actors within the union, and also my fellow dancers in different places.
Mhm.
But I will say I think dancing within opera, or really in any theater setting is just a little bit different, in understanding, I think, our value and our worth within the space, and also being able to advocate for our working conditions. And that is because a lot of those spaces are union. And if they're not union, they're modeled after union
Right.
companies or organizations. So
Right.
yeah, also thinking about that too, and how much of a learning journey it's been from just joining the board to, recently, I guess a year ago, being elected to vice president. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. It's so,
Thank you.
exciting to have you.
Thank
Well,
you.
do you choreograph or create in the dance sphere?
Um, I'm gonna yes. So if there's any Black Dance Changemakers listening, they're gonna appreciate this answer. But as far as like dance works, I do not choreograph. I actually was talking to someone at work about this the other day. I can choreograph, right? Like I took comp, I understand choreography. Hey, I might even choreograph really well. or well, right? But I'm not passionate about it. I'm not a
Mhm,
choreographer at heart, at least right now in my journey.
mhm,
Definitely still I'm the tool. I'm the instrument. You know what I
mm,
mean? Set it on me.
mhm,
That's where I'm at. So I think I have the ability to if I'm in an educational setting and it's more of that kind of choreography, but like passionate enough to like wake up and choreograph dances every day, day in and day out. Like I am a choreographer.
yeah,
That's not me.
yeah.
But to the Black Dance Changemakers, um, our mission statement is that we're redefining performance through choreographed movements of change. And what we mean by that is we're looking at like how choreography, here come the air quotes, exists in like our everyday lives, but also in a lot of our movements,
Mhm,
and like the organizing that has happened both historically, but also today. So I'm
mhm,
thinking about like I always use the example of um, let's see, I can use the example of a sit-in, for example, during the
yep,
civil rights movement. Or even I'll use maybe like the bus boycotts, where, we
yeah,
know the famous story about Rosa Parks, who sat at the front of the bus, even though there was like, dark-skinned women who had been doing that also before her. But, colorism exists, all that to say. People think that, like, we'll use Rosa Parks for this example. She just got on the bus that day and was like fed up with it, and she went to the front of the bus, and history was made. And the reality is, like, that was a movement,
right,
right? That was a movement that there were meetings,
mhm,
meetings, there were rehearsal, there were practice, there
yep,
were discussions about like, if this happens, then this, if that happens, then
mhm,
this. Um, and then there was a performance. Then they went out and did the thing,
yeah,
right? So thinking about like connecting our artistic practice to right now our advocacy or organizing practice, how
mhm,
can we as dancers connect to what is closest to us, which is
mhm,
movement, which is
mhm,
choreography, and which is performance, and transform that connection and that community that we have into an organizing effort, into
mhm,
advocacy, into moving things in our lives that can impact and improve our material conditions. So that's, am I a choreographer? Like, in the way that we use it, mostly no, but I am trying to choreograph movements and choreograph performances within our industry that like improve the material conditions, the wants, needs,
mhm,
and desires of Black folks.
yeah.
So that's my answer to that.
Love it. Love that so much. And you're I guess in your dance career, you feel more of an instrument, a tool to bring, we'll say, other people's visions to life. Does that also, I don't want to get this construed with you can't be a leader as a dancer in the room. Obviously, you have a voice, you have, ways of influencing the work that's happening in the room. But does being more of like, someone that is making a vision come to life feel like it balances your leadership roles in like every other corner that you
Mm,
have? Or
yeah. I think yes. Um, and I'll just say that too, like,
yeah,
I think I do feel like a calling or a gift in like being a rehearsal director
yeah,
or at a tour or like a director, even like working in opera. I'm like, I could be a director. I could be a
yeah.
stage director,
I can see it. I can see
Yeah.
it.
And I think I could choreograph large scale like operas or something like that, because that, I think, it's directing, it is choreography, but it's also movement direction. It's a little bit it requires different things other than like 5, 6, 7, 8. Um so just to like add a little bit more color, just in case anybody's listening, they need a movement director.
And the director
But
or
I did think that, like, yeah, and I think if, I don't know what my career will look like, but I think that I'm not a person who would necessarily be limited to like an artistic director position, but like I also feel confident that I could also be an executive director as well. So
Yeah,
just to like expand on that as well. And I think I could do either, but I think that, yeah, yeah, that's my answer
yeah,
to that question. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Talk about being part of a process for creating a new work. I know you just premiered El Nino at the Metropolitan
Mhm.
Opera. Were you part of that process from the beginning?
I mean, opera is something else. I love it because of the scale, and I think I love how we bring stories to life in ways that sometimes I think get lost in dance, and sometimes it's only because of budget, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Straight
yeah.
up, just kind of the budget that we work in, specifically at the
Mhm.
Met. But yeah, and that's El Nino right there, budget. I mean, there's some really cool stuff happening on that stage. But yeah, I mean, El Nino is a really beautiful production. I've really enjoyed working with Liliana Blaine Cruz, the director. I was a puppeteer actually in this production. So James Ortiz was our puppeteer director,
Oh,
and
cool.
then Marjani Forte Saunders was the choreographer. So we had like a rock star creative team, and any other folks on the creative team I may have missed. A rock star creative team that really, I think, brought something spectacular, new, young, and fresh to the Metropolitan Opera. And this is someone I've been in over a dozen different productions at the Met. You know, I've done and seen a lot in that house, and I think that this feels to me like a possible shift in like the energy of the house and the work that's being done there. I think that it's a John Adams production, so you know we haven't done a lot of his work at the Met. So I think it's also and John Adams was the composer. It's also that was kind of not a beginning. It's not the only John Adams we've had. We had a few in the past, but you know a lot of opera lovers would argue we could have had more.
Yeah.
Liliana, it was her first production at the Met. Marjani, the choreographer, first time. James, I believe, the first time.
Wow, that's
So
a lot of first-time people in the
there were
creative team. That's very cool.
a lot of debuts in this
Yeah.
production. And it was the nativity story. I describe
Mhm,
it as like an abstraction of the nativity story.
mhm,
We include a lot of stories from the Apocrypha, which
mhm,
are like the deleted scenes of the Bible. So you see
mm.
dragons on stage, for example, within the production. But yeah, I was pretty much in it from the beginning. You know, from tech rehearsal to rehearsals to stage. Yeah, it's also been really cool working as a puppeteer. I've worked as a
Mhm,
puppeteer in a couple of productions. This was my first, like, full out puppeteer role, but, you know, we also have The Magic Flute, which is, by Julie Taymor, so we also do a lot of puppeteering in that, as well as Butterfly, which I'm, in right now, which has puppeteering. I do a little bit of puppeteering in Butterfly, so those little spurts prepared me for this moment, and I think really
mhm.
getting to work with James and everyone else, they were, like, professional puppeteers, like, they do this on Broadway and stuff like that,
Yeah,
so
wow.
just learning about the world of puppeteering was really special, and how much magic it can bring to a show, uh,
Mhm.
and, like, it is I think James in an interview, described it as, like, CGI of
Yeah.
theater. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, totally,
that's what
totally.
it is. So, yeah, that's Nino, but then different processes look different, you know? I've been in a handful of new productions at the Met, and it's always fun getting to originate a role, and I think that's
Yeah.
consistent with dance, but, like, walking into a role has a certain experience and a nice challenge as an artist to try to, like, bend and mold to, like, what's already been set there,
Mhm.
but as we know, there's nothing like, getting to originate a role, and maybe find your flow and your move and your breath
Yeah.
in a role and kind of set that. And also kind of, you know, you're part of the history of the role. You know, as this thing comes back, uh,
Mhm.
your essence will always be a part of it, even in the many different iterations. So that's also working at the Met. Like, you know, some of these shows stay on the Rep for 20, 30 years sometimes. So like
Yeah.
to know that something I might have contributed might be on that stage for decades to come is also really special.
Yeah, yeah. And so working at the Met, you get to work with the same, like, granted it's a large company, but the same company of dancers revisiting roles over and over again. But you're also a very active freelance dancer working with small companies like Converge Dance, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. But how does the process of like jumping into a company and doing something maybe that's existed before and you only have 2 weeks to learn it, like how does that process differ for you and how do you still bring Antoine to the table?
Yeah. I I think it's really so mostly with Converge so far, it's been I'd say like 95% new
Yeah.
choreography. You know, there's sometimes we did like some Kylie stuff that had been there.
Mhm.
That was like at the beginning of my time there. But
Right.
yeah, I love that because it's all three of you have different voices and ways of working. So
Mhm.
it's like you get a 3-in-1 like
You
combo
get a
pretzel.
3-in-1 deal,
No,
that's for sure.
seriously, you know, most companies you're working with one choreographer, so you
Yeah.
get to kind of and that's something for me, I like to work in repertory environments,
Mhm.
I rarely work in, like, single choreographer director spaces, so I love Converge because it's a single company, that has this, like, multi-choreographer repertory feel, and it is repertory, but like, that's
Yeah.
really special to me as well. So yeah, I love you all have very different aesthetics. You all have very different priorities. So
Mhm.
there's also a challenge even working with you in one program to have to jump back and forth between different styles, movements,
Yeah.
uh, what is it? Dynamics, accents. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
and then as far as like again, like I think I said it a bit earlier, but there's a challenge in both, and I really appreciate the challenge in both. Like I don't mind jumping into something that's been set before, either in
Right.
a dance company or more of a theater opera experience, because there's a certain challenge to like fill those shoes, like, and there's a certain discipline to it that I think is cool to be challenged with as an artist. To find your own voice within the role, you're
Mhm.
gonna be you up there anyway, so that's gonna shine
It's
through.
coming out no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially with me, it's gonna come out.
Why we love
But
you.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like, I think that's the fun, part of those processes, but then obviously, like I said, with the new production or a new creation, how do I wanna do it? Or
Yeah.
how does my body respond to it, and what is the relationship between you and the choreographer? Because that's what sets up a lot of the movement, and it's like, if you and I are working in the studio, we're working together to
Yeah.
find how this thing feels good, looks good within our eyes and our bodies. Um, and that might be different than what the person before me who did it experiences in the role. And you might have had a different connection that makes it feel good for them, but to really have the opportunity, um, kind of add your little thing to it is, yeah, really special.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you're out here giving so much away. You're out energetically for the better. You're out here unlocking doors. You're out here giving a voice to everyone. How do you give back to you? How do you refill your cup at the end of the day with so much giving, Antoine? How do you have time
Ooh,
in the day?
clock my tea, Jordan, clock my tea. No, I'm actually no one's perfect at self-care, and that's not even what I'm trying to say, but I am giving self-care king over here, believe it or not. Now, it might look different than other people's self-care, right? It's going to naturally. I have a very busy schedule, so like I can't take 2 weeks off randomly and, go to Turks and Caicos, but like I'm for me, and this started in high school, which was probably maybe a little too early. Not really, but like, in a capitalist society, we gotta say it was a little too early for me to have this mindset. But whenever I would get stressed out or too sleepy to do my work, I would just close my computer. And what I would do was like go to sleep then and wake up a little bit earlier and tackle it. So it still got done on time before school. And like just that shifting of like, you gonna sleep, just shift it up. When you're
Yeah.
tired, you're exhausted. You work slower when you're exhausted. You're not as creative, all of that. Shift the sleep up and then wake up when you're energized. So like even that as a process for me, whenever I'm feeling like super stressed out or overwhelmed, we're gonna move on, sweetie. We're gonna
We
move on. We're gonna
listen.
come
We
back to this
listen.
later,
Yeah.
when we can. That's not always an option. Also boundary setting. Whew,
Mhm.
we love a boundary, right? And I try to be clear with people that like, you know, we may or may not be receiving the same amount of communications on a daily basis. I'll speak for myself. I receive a lot. So I may not be able to respond as immediately as people need. I try to communicate though if there's something that's urgent or important, how to get that information to me, and also I communicate to people when they can expect a response. So I try to like navigate because I also know what I'm navigating, but people might not always see that or know that. So I think self care is also being clear about boundaries and being clear about expectations, especially around our communication practices. And that's something that I learned from a mentor, colleague, friend, Sydney Mosley, who has like, y'all have seen because y'all email me, but like the little email footer with like communication
Oh my god,
boundaries.
I love it. I love it.
It's just for me, it just allows me to exhale because I get a lot of anxiety around emails and communications just because I have so much coming in on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Like it's it used to really stress me out. So instead of doing that, I release that by just letting people know what they can expect. So if
Mhm.
that's helpful to anybody, right? Like let people know what they can expect from you, and that releases like a lot of that tension of you trying to meet these expectations that have never been communicated or discussed or agreed upon.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I think boundaries and expectation setting is self-care. I also take a lot of baths. I take a lot of baths, believe it or not. I also work a lot in the bath, and this is a close friends moment. So not
Mhm.
everybody knows this. If you've been in certain me, if you've been in certain meetings with me or on certain things, like I may or may not have been in the bath, but that's just a place where I can like still find time to relax a little bit. And I know
Mhm.
that might not seem relaxing to some people, but also as dancers, like literally laying in a bath is actually like PT for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So
Totally.
for me, it's like finding that time to like get a little work done. I'm also really creative in there. I got my little tray set up. I have my bath bombs, my salts and stuff. It's candles
Oh,
going.
it is your
Love a
happy.
good bath. Love
Should
a
have
good
done
bath.
a podcast in the bath. I would have joined you.
Now listen, I might have. Do we need to re-record this?
Do we have to go back
Go run some water right now.
quick?
No, but yeah. I mean,
No,
but
but yeah, maybe next episode. Who knows?
But I'll say lastly for me too, what I do love about the Met is that we work what is it? I guess August to June.
Mm,
We get summers off. And I know that a lot of dance companies don't get that, you know? They might get like a few weeks off. I don't know, but we actively like because ABT uses our space in the summer, so we have the summer off. So I think in the past I've jam-packed my summers with like work and all this stuff. But
mhm,
self-care for me now looks like using summer for rest,
mhm.
using summer for travel, to see family and stuff, but also to just do I don't tour anymore, so also to just do the traveling that I kinda wanna do on that off
Yeah,
time, to
yeah,
read.
yeah.
I don't have time to read really much in my life right now, you know, there's just so much going on. So I what I do, I, like, have so many carts open at, like, these different bookstores and also just, like, books that I'm ordering and they're here, that I'm, like, waiting to read this summer, and not to say
The
I'm a
stack builds all year and then you
yeah,
knock
because
it
it's
down.
like it's a lot of books that I'm,
Yeah.
but it's like things that I'm excited to like, sink my teeth into a little bit. So I think really reclaiming my summers, and what that looks like though, I think it's important because we talk about this stuff, but we don't always tell people how to do it. It means shifting my budget
Yeah.
means I might be putting away a little bit of extra savings so that I can have the summer off. You know what I mean? It might be putting in extra hours at a job or something to be able to afford that summer off. So I do like to name both of those sides because it's like, oh yeah, and I just take my summers off and travel and read
Right.
books. And it's like, how do you do
How do you
that?
achieve that though? Like,
Yeah.
how do you yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So I think finding that balance and also, I have enough work throughout the year to be able to do that too. That's a privilege that I'm also, living within. So, but yeah, that's my self-care is really reclaiming my summers, taking lots of baths, boundaries and expectations. Um, and puppy hugs.
Puppy hugs. I
Daughters
thought I saw your puppy back there a couple times, and I totally forgot that you have a dog, but, oh my gosh, so cute.
he's asleep.
Oh, puppy, sleepy puppy. What's his
Thanks.
Banks.
Thanks. There you go. Just say hey.
Oh,
I got the like blur thing. I don't know how to turn it off.
I can see him enough, he's cute.
She was like, "I'm out of here."
A quick hello and I'm out. Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
last question that I'm asking everybody, Antoine, but what does converge mean to you? Either the verb, the space, just
Hmm.
converge.
Yeah, I have a move for our friends who are watching, but it's like, "Pew, pew," but like the good kind of one of those. And
Uh-huh.
then those who are listening, I think converge to me means collaboration. It means exchange. It
Mhm.
means giving and receiving. Some of these things might have similar meanings. Um, But I feel like that's what really happens in the converge space. I think it's also about creativity, exploration. Mm, this is what converge means to me. And that's also, I think it shows up in the studio. It shows up in the directors. It shows up in the dancers. All of these things community, collaboration, creativity, exploration,
Yeah.
and an explosion of all those things.
Good explosion. Yeah. Oh. Well, thanks, Antoine. It was so nice to chat with you. Is there anything else you wanna chime in, throw in? You feeling good?
Mm-mm. I'll
Ready
see
for this?
y'all on the stage.
That sounds great.
Yes.
I can't wait.
Yes.
Yay, thanks.
Thanks, Jordan.